The state transportation secretary told me last week adding one lane in each direction from Portland to Vancouver, BC would cost $100 billion, so double what high-speed rail would cost.
Hi, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thanks for joining us here in the unique Northwest. We are with Tom Banse today, and the theme is transportation of all sorts. Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be with you.
So Tom, like I said, covers a lot of transportation issues, and there are multiple ones that we're going to talk about today. First, Tom, I'm wondering, what do you have in your wallet? And are you real ID compliant? Because that is going to be something very important for Washington and Oregon travelers here in the next year. Tell us why.
Well, I'll tell you, I have an enhanced driver license, which I'm very glad I got a number of years ago. This will be very valuable for getting on airplanes starting next October. So October 2020, the federal government says no more extensions. You have to have a secure driver's license to get on a domestic flight, basically pass through the TSA checkpoint at Spokane or Seattle or Portland International or any other federal airport checkpoints. This, as you can see on your screen there, is an enhanced driver license from Washington State. The Oregon version doesn't come out till next summer, so there's going to be a very short amount of time in Oregon to get a compliant document. The distinguishing element is that star in the upper right-hand corner in the Oregon license, or the flag you can see overlaid on the photo on the Washington license. Those indicate to the TSA agent that you have a secure license that meets the federal requirements. A regular driver's license from Oregon or Washington will be good for almost everything a license is good for now, except for going into, say, a federal military base starting next year and going through airport security, which is federally controlled.
Okay, so it makes us wonder, Tom, or at least it makes me wonder, why have Washington and Oregon been, I guess, out of compliance for so long? Like, why aren't all 50 states just on the same standard, and why are some playing catch-up at this point?
That's a very good question, because this dates back to 2005 when Congress passed what's known as the Real ID Act, and that is a follow-on from the 2001 terrorist attacks, when some of the terrorists in the 9/11 attacks used fake licenses to learn how to fly. So the federal government's been harping on this for a while on the states to improve their document verification, to scan everything somebody brings into the DMV when they apply for a license and save that information on a server forever, make those photos that they take of us digital. That was considered by states, many states, probably half the states in the U.S. at one time, as an unfunded mandate. So they dragged their feet, Washington and Oregon among them. Over time, a lot of the things the federal government wanted, states came around to saying, yeah, that's a good idea anyway, and we'll do it. And it hasn't become that big of a burden now in recent years. And the federal government gave our states many extensions over the years, but now they're saying this October 2020 date, that's a hard deadline. We're not going to give you any more chances to kick the can down the road.
Well, we will encourage everyone to look into their wallets and see if their license does comply with these standards, and if not, you have about a year to figure it out. So
yeah, and one thing we should point out very quickly is you may have an alternative in your wallet already. And this may not affect you if you have a U.S. passport or another country's passport, or you have a military ID or a federally recognized tribe's ID. There's a lot of alternatives that may put you right at the airport, which is mainly what we're talking about at this point, domestic air travel anyway.
Right, so let's move off of planes and onto trains. I-976 passed by Washington voters the $30 car tabs initiative, meaning that a lot of transportation projects are potentially at risk. And so, Tom, we've heard a lot about maybe the potential impacts in King County and the Seattle area based on the Sound Transit budgets, and they're going to sue to possibly try to change things there. But let's look beyond that to maybe central and eastern Washington. A lot of counties are scrambling for what they might do with this. What are some of the impacts out of the Sound region and across the rest of the state?
There are quite a few, and the hit probably is going to be biggest on the smaller transit agencies. So this would be like Garfield County, Grant County, Washington, some of the transit agencies in the Columbia River Gorge. they get a lot of their funding from state grants. And the pot of money that those grants come from was whacked quite a bit by the initiative the voters passed earlier this month. So transit agency, their statewide association, is joining the lawsuit to enjoin, basically, Initiative 976. That would allow counties to keep collecting county car tab revenue, which also goes into transit as well as just regular road maintenance around places from central Washington, particularly Spokane area. That lawsuit is pending, so we don't know if a judge will say effective December 5, when the initiative is supposed to take effect, whether it actually will or not. So transit agencies are also going to the state legislature saying, help us out at least temporarily. The state has surplus money. It's really unclear, based on a hearing I went to yesterday afternoon, whether the state legislature will step up and just say, we'll bail you out temporarily. So I would expect serious cutbacks in transit operating hours to be the first thing we see starting this winter, quite possibly. And then next year, just regular road maintenance may be cut back quite a bit, like filling potholes, chip seal on your neighborhood streets, things like that.
Well, if there's one thing everyone can rally around, it is the idea of fixing potholes. We'll certainly look at that. Tom, even with that uncertainty about the transportation funding, it appears that plans, however, are moving forward with at least the idea to further study the high-speed rail proposals between Vancouver, British Columbia, and Portland, so connecting much of the west side of the Cascades there. Just remind us some of the background of the need for this, and why, frankly, has it taken so long for high-speed rail to even get to this point of being studied in the Northwest? We're a highly innovative and technological region of the country, especially in the Puget Sound region. But one could argue that China, Japan, a lot of European countries are far ahead of this region and the United States in this way. Why is that?
Well, the problem at this point is that our existing Amtrak service shares the railroad, the tracks, with freight trains, and the freight trains own the line, and the trains can't really safely go a lot faster than the 80 miles per hour they now run in this Amtrak Cascades corridor. So to get to true high-speed rail, which, as you said, other parts of the world have enviable systems, they pay much higher gas taxes than we do to subsidize that, by the way. In our region, we'd have to build a new right-of-way for true high-speed rail. That will be extraordinarily expensive to buy that land. It will involve tunneling. It will involve a lot of bridges to get through Western Washington from Vancouver to Seattle to Portland. I don't know where $42 billion will come from at this point, but there is a lot of enthusiasm because the alternative is putting more lanes on Interstate 5. And that, when you think about $42 billion being an extraordinary ask, the state transportation secretary told me last week adding one lane in each direction from Portland to Vancouver, BC would cost $100 billion, so double what high-speed rail would cost. That, to the advocates, makes the case to keep studying this and actually very soon moving to right-of-way planning and acquisition.
I don't know what the problem is. Just turn on the printing presses and start making money. Isn't that how it works? Maybe not. But let's be realistic, though. This could happen, maybe, sometime in our lifetimes, the high-speed rail on the west side of the Cascades.
I'd like to see it, but man,
right.
I'm not sure if it's going to be in my lifetime.
Okay, so then if it's a hard sell on the west side of the Cascades, even more of a dream on the east side of the Cascades, connecting Spokane, the Tri-Cities, up to Seattle, down to Boise or something like that. Is that in any way even in the conversation, or is that just so far beyond the pale?
It is in the conversation. Now, this might not be the same really high-speed rail that they're talking about for the I-5 corridor, which is 250 miles per hour trains in the visioning process, at least. But there is talk about bringing back the cross-state trains that many decades ago existed. A group called All Aboard Washington, which is a lobbying group and advocacy for rail advocates and enthusiasts, they succeeded in tacking on a little provision on the west side ultra high-speed rail study to revive an east-west train in the Stampede Pass corridor. So that's now being studied by a consultant. We'll probably get a report next year on ridership and costs. This would revive a train from Seattle that would go over the mountains through the Yakima Valley to Tri-Cities and then up to Spokane. The trouble is the operating costs long term. Amtrak, I learned when reporting about a similar idea to revive a train from Portland to Boise through the Columbia River Gorge, Amtrak doesn't pay for trains anymore that run less than 750 miles per hour, or 750 miles. And so that means, a cross-state train, Seattle to Spokane is about 350 miles. The run Portland to Boise is about 500 miles. The cost would have to be borne by the states. And again, we've subsidized just about all forms of transportation to some degree, but finding new money to subsidize an expansion of service of this nature is going to be hard in the legislature. There's no two ways around that.
Okay, let's move on to something else, not necessarily a fantasy, but it is something to watch out for or maybe listen for. That is the return of the Supersonics to the Northwest. And no, we don't mean the basketball team. Sorry, Sonics fans. We mean supersonic jets and them being tested for potential commercial use. Tell us more about that.
I was really interested in this when I heard about it. So the Port of Moses Lake and a tenant at the Moses Lake Airport called Aerotech, which does aircraft certification, flight testing, and engineering, they have heard about companies elsewhere in the U.S. These are mostly aerospace manufacturing startups that want to bring back supersonic flight, which has not been around since the Concorde was retired in 2003. Moses Lake is already used somewhat for testing new airliners. Think of the Mitsubishi regional jet that you see there now. And so boosters there think, why not make a big square in the sky, a long rectangle, a little bit shy, as you can see on the map there, of parallel to the Canadian border, and bring lots of jobs for the flight testing for this. It'd be a little safer to put it over land rather than over the ocean, because then if there were a problem, you could divert to the nearest airport. That proposal is into the FAA, and we're waiting. Probably won't be till next year whether we hear if that flies.
I'm going to be a little cynical here. We've heard of commercial space travel, companies wanting to take people to the moon or to Mars or just into orbit, and people being able to pay for that. That is for the wealthy, not for the average traveler, not for the average vacation goer. Is the eventual return of commercial supersonic air travel only for those who can really afford it, and the rest of us are still paying $50 to check our luggage in coach?
I'm afraid so. So 2 of these proposals are for supersonic business jets. So this would be corporate CEOs whose time apparently is far more valuable than ours. And so they'll go from Los Angeles to Japan in 3.5 hours or something like that in a roughly 18-person jet. One of the proposals, though, from a company called Boom Supersonic, which is based on the East Coast, they are thinking of a 50 to 75 passenger airliner. Now, that would be an all business class jet, so still probably not for you and me. But, if you do well in life, maybe some point 10 years from now, you can take a very quick trip to Paris.
Something to strive for. I'm sure all those corporate CEOs will have plenty of golden parachutes on those jets. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise.
You can see all of Tom's reporting on these and other topics at nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.